All right, welcome along to my first live stream. I thought that it would be a good idea to move away from just recording videos and editing them and then uploading them and having a little bit of interaction here and there to just going live and see what happens. So I made myself a coffee, and it's nice and it's late at night here. I'm just going to chat about AI transformation and what I think is happening in that world. So my background is as a project manager in financial services. I did that for over 12 years. But in February this year, I decided to take a break and focus on the world of AI. And I've always been interested in technology, but what I could see on the horizon was a world where this was a different type of technology, and it was essentially going to make things a lot more challenging over the next few years. And I felt like in a traditional corporate environment, there are some constraints that you mightn't face if you're working at the frontier at a startup. So what I wanted to do was spend a lot of time reading, researching, working with select clients, and working on side projects using agentic coding tools. I wanted to figure out what's the gap between the rhetoric or the marketing and the reality of this technology. I mean, I think there is a real problem where if you're not a technologist or someone who has worked with developers and people in technical roles, sometimes it's hard to really pull apart what's sensational and what's actually just a realistic extrapolation of a trend. If you think back a couple of years, there's been lots of times where people struggle with growth curves, where something's getting better and better every few months, and it's really hard for them to think, okay, so I can generate a basic anime picture today, but they can't get to the logical conclusion of that technology improving at that rate over the course of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And if you look at things like AI image generation and video generation, that's a real good example of how fast the space is growing. A few years ago, I'd need to go back and check the exact date, but when Midjourney started to come out and you had to log into Discord and use quite clunky ways of generating it where everyone else could actually see what you were generating, I was pretty impressed. And Midjourney was one of the first sort of mass successes around image generation. But I haven't used or heard about Midjourney for months. I think the last time I used it was at the start of this year. And that's because this space in the AI world has become so competitive and so all-encompassing that every single subcategory has dozens of people competing to have their models, their tools, their harnesses be the thing that wins in that category, because it's a winner-take-all market. If you think about the average weekly users number that OpenAI talks about for ChatGPT, I think it's in the hundreds of millions of people every week are using ChatGPT at least once. That makes it one of the fastest growing products, consumer facing, ever. Only a fraction of these people are paying. But that's not where the real market is. Consumer is very early days. When I think about AI transformation, I think about enterprise clients. And enterprise clients have very different ways of thinking about how they buy technology, how they choose vendors, how they choose to apply new technology inside their environments. Because let's say you're a listed company in the United States. You have so many compliance and regulatory obligations that you have to follow you can't just easily implement technology. You need to make sure there's some governance and risk management and controls wrapped around how you're testing it out. So that's something which OpenAI, Anthropic, Google, Amazon, Oracle, all these big tech and big AI platforms are really gunning for. And the way that we've first seen this is, I guess, the attack on software development with agentic coding tools. And AI is interesting in that what parts of AI capability have improved the most? It's the ones with lots of data out on the internet. So because a lot of the models can look at what's on GitHub and be trained to write better code over time, the agentic coding tools have sort of gone after software development and gotten better and better and better. And it depends on what your assessment is. I guess if you were a computer science or software engineering expert, I'm not. But as someone who's had to work with developers and technologists over my career, working with an agentic coding tool is easier than working with most engineers. We should really take a step back and think about that. Because at the moment, you still need to do the testing, you still need to do all the quality controls, you still need to do all these other things. But if it's easier to chat to a tool, just like sending a Slack or Teams message, what does that mean over time, especially for more junior people? Why a company is going to bother hiring junior graduate developers and training them up if they can just make the mid-level to senior people they have more productive by giving them Claude Code? It's a real conundrum, and I think this hollowing out of the career ladder, if you want to call it that, is one of those aspects of AI transformation that is going to need a lot of management. And by management, I mean two things. One, the leadership of a company needs to really think about how many people do they need in the medium term, in the long run? How much can they simplify their operating model? And then that talent management angle of, well, if we used to hire 10 graduate software developers and now we only need 1 or 2, what does it mean for society? Because these will be kids who did well in school, studied computer science or software engineering, and already in the US especially, you're seeing that they're struggling to find graduate roles unless they're at the very, very top few percentile points. And that's pretty shocking because that will start to impact the supply of skilled people into the wider workforce. Because if the connection between work hard at school, work hard at university, get a good job, grow in career, whatever, starts to break down because entry level to even medium rung career opportunities start to fade away because a company would rather push a task to an AI agent, that could have some really interesting societal consequences. So I think that's something which, even though there are a lot of benefits to the technology, there probably needs to be a bit of a societal rethink around how our attitudes to a lot of things work. Because the reality is, the most complex tasks that an AI model is doing when they do all these benchmark tests that the labs talk about, they're problems which are so far beyond the complexity of the problems a typical business faces that there's probably some truth to this argument that I've seen on Substack and on X recently, that if you froze technology today with AI models as they are, you could spend the next 10 years uplifting the performance of business, government, not-for-profit education sector just by applying the technology as it exists today. to existing business problems. So you don't even need the models to keep getting better. With what we've got today, you could probably radically reduce the complexity and cost of a lot of operating models. Just think about all those times where you have to ring someone in a call center, fill out a paper form, have a process where it doesn't flow naturally through a business. A person needs to email another person or have a meeting or Teams call or whatever. All of these frictions that exist in a business environment, that's where AI and AI agents are going to have a lot of impact over the next few years. That's where the real transformation comes. It's not generating really high quality videos near instantaneously. It's all of the cost that is required to put together each product and service in the economy starts to get chipped away at as more and more parts of that value chain get automated or made much more efficient through the use of AI. And this can be well outside software development. Healthcare, logistics, defense, all of these industries are going to find enormous upsides to using AI to help people solve problems and do things better, faster, and cheaper. So all of this is happening in a bottom-up way. So people facing problems will start using AI to help them solve problems. But it's also happening top-down, where boards, investors, capital markets, they see the potential economic returns from cutting these costs and raising revenues. And they really want AI transformations to work. Now, the catch is that all of the stuff is just like any other transformation program. You still need to put all of the governance and controls and thinking about what that future state looks like. You need to put that effort in at the start. Things should be faster with AI, but a lot of the change management, the training, the working with people to overcome fear and resistance to change, that's going to be more important than ever. So this concludes my sort of initial chat. I'm just going to have a few sips of my coffee and then we can resume. So one thing that I think a lot of people in the corporate world know is that process and ensuring that there's the right governance and documentation and adherence to a control framework is really important. And a lot of people working in these support functions haven't tried out the AI tools themselves. And I think that if a lot of them did and put the effort in, they'd actually find that AI gives you leverage to be more compliant. So, for example, if you're working on a project and it has to comply with a large number of policies, procedures, and controls that are all written in long PDF documents, an AI agent can interrogate these documents and benchmark documentation against multiple different things. It can find these gaps for you systematically. It can help you design better tests, controls, and mitigations of different risks that exist. And I think that when regulators in some industries figure this out, we might actually see a lot of roles in specialist compliance type areas emerge, where the expectation might become, you previously told us that it was too hard to do this or this, so we let you do this, which is a bit less effort. Now that we know, as your regulator, that you have access to all these AI tools, our expectation is much higher. We think there's even less excuse for you not to do this or this or this. And that's kind of a bit of a reframe from how some people are thinking. So because of the speed of building a vibe-coded web page and Lovable or whatever. I think some people get a bit carried away. The real AI transformation driver is going to be all throughout the economy. Because things will be cheaper, we might end up consuming that back by demanding more product features, more free incentives, or other forms of value from a provider or a product or service, because we'll be thinking, wait a minute, you want to charge me a few $1,000s for this? I could replicate 90% of what you're selling me by spending an hour going back and forth with ChatGPT 5.1 Pro or Claude Opus 4.5 and uploading all the relevant documents to the chat thread and asking, what am I missing? Is this the right thing to do? People are going to use AI more as a thinking and due diligence partner on so many things that it's really hard to see exactly where a lot of this stuff will land in a few years, because we might find that costs might come down, but the customer expectations will be so high. And we might end up at this sort of, one thing I've written about on Substack is this idea of like hyper competition, where you're almost at the perfect competition concept in economics, but not quite, where almost everything is indistinguishable because anyone can replicate a lot of advantages in a product or service through using AI to help them replicate things. So only the human-centered things really sustain in the long term. I think that's sort of all I wanted to say for this evening, just to do my first live stream, get it up there and just see what happens. I think that if you have been skeptical about AI technology, it's still very early, because a lot of companies have put so much control and restriction around how AI tools are used in their corporate environment for reasonable reasons, that more and more opportunities are going to emerge where one competitor in an industry is going to be the first mover. They will have an enormous advantage because they will use AI to reinvent their operating model and offer better products and services at much more competitive price rates. And this is this hyper competition concept where we can contrast this against the hundreds of billions, if not trillions of dollars being invested in AI data centers, AI this, AI that, and think about the wider global economy. It's really hard to figure out exactly how all of those value and profit pools will look at the moment. And this is part of the fun of spending all this time investigating and experimenting and building things, because my take is this is going to be even more revolutionary than the internet or cellular was. This is a real step change, because making knowledge and the ability to solve problems so much easier and cheaper for anyone with access to the latest models is an enormous leveler and equalizer. Over time, a lot of innovation, new scientific discoveries, cures for diseases, all of this positive societal stuff will come out. There will be some societal costs, and that's where I think people have jumped too far to the sci-fi threat things and forgotten the quite real things to worry about. What does it mean if already graduates and entry-level jobs are less attractive for corporates to hire because they can push tasks to AI, or just make their medium career and senior people more effective? It's a really interesting challenge, and if you are interested in hearing more of my thinking about this sort of thing, like and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next live stream.